Trystie's Quest, or Kit, King of the Pigwidgeons. By Greville MacDonald. Chapter 2. The attic in the barn. Kit makes his pipe and makes his audience a strange result. The trouble was very real to Kit. Davy would often begin to do or make something and then tire of it. But with Kit, anything undertaken became a duty till it was done. So now it was inevitable that he should make that pipe and call the little people to his side. His industry was amazing. Constantly at this time, when other boys would be playing or reading stories, he would sit at work and alone in the gable end of the barn. This gable end was close under the roof, and had been floored across with wide oak boards, so as to make a platform, which was reached by a ladder from the floor below. Here in winter roots were stored, swedes and potatoes chiefly, but also beets, turnips, onions, carrots, and on shelves, apples when they were very plentiful. This end of the barn was very dark, but the small gable itself was dimly lit by a circular leaded skylight of blue, red, and green glass in minute diamond panes. It was no bigger than a soup plate. No one had ever seen it open. What purpose it had ever served I cannot say. The colors were so rich, and the glass so thick, that I am sure the little window was very old. Indeed, it was in this gable end that, years before, we had found an ancient coffer, and in it a certain magic crook which has been elsewhere told about. The whole farm and buildings are very old, and the owls could tell wonderful stories of our children's ancestry. It was always in this dim-lit loft that Kit would labor at making his pipe and tabber, or whittle and tab, as the old people called it. Standing guardian over the barn is an ash bigger and older than any I have ever seen in the south. When the wind was tossing and fluttering its leafy shadows across the lichened tiles, a sunny company of colored lights would dance upon the old floor within and strengthen Kit in his conviction that someday he would get real fairy people there also. The eeriness of the place gained much from the strange faint snoring of the owl fledglings up among the rafters, a snoring performed when the queer baby birds are wide awake and hungry for more mouse meat. Kit would set in a row before him the great clumsy swedes and try his pipes upon them. Getting no visible response, he would take purple-red mangolds and beets, greeny-white turnips, red carrots, and brown potatoes. With his pocket-knife he cut faces on them, long slits of mouths, some smiling, some crooked, with grains of wheat for teeth, scooped-out nostrils, round or oval eyes according to the creature's character, with boot buttons or beads for pupils, and, most important of all, big ears of all shapes, so that there should be no excuses for not hearing his pipe and tabber. The ears were the chief difficulty. Strips of leather from a derelict and bulgy horse collar made donkey ears, bits of rabbit skin stood for flat ears like Curdy's, 2 bits of pink silk that he begged of Kirsty served for pigs' flapping ears, while little pointed cat's ears he moulded out of putty and soot, and could not get his hands quite clean all the next day. He looked with covetous eyes upon Princess Honeypot's blue frock in process of making and secured some stray pieces for one necktie. He got enough horse hair from the combings of Wixis Manor to plait another tie. He borrowed some brass trappings from Charlie, the carter, and made one serve as breastplate for a giant Swede, with slices of carrot for buttons. He stuck through it the rusty spring of an old rat trap and onto this again a little purple mangold, in which he cut an awful slit of a mouth. The mouth drooped at the corners, so that it looked like a bitter smile. He gathered lichen for an old man's beard, green moss for a witch's hair, and skinned a dead mole for the dress of a lady. He found the best things for arms and legs were the roots of heather, which twist about as if really intended for the limbs of grotesque creatures. Altogether he made 12 extraordinary people, with wonderful individuality of character, though their hearts were all earthy and their brains very thick. He so arranged them in a half-circle that the colored lights should dance before them and show them the way of life. Oh, Kit was full of enterprise. He still wore a smock on weekdays, but no smock ever before had so many pockets inside it. Hence his figure was generally as queer as his swedes and potatoes. For the pockets were always stuffed full of the most important things in the world, bits of leather and wood, buttons, beads, and string, more than one pocket knife, often live creatures, such as shrews and moles, guinea pigs, and rabbits. But at this time the chief contents were such musical instruments as the shepherd folk have made and used from the most ancient times. He had even made an attempt at panpipes. But nearly all the specimens were whistles or pipes with finger holes, while their proper accompaniment, the tabber or little drum, he would carry slung across his back. Kit knew that the shrillness of the pipe, in spite of its sweetness, needed the deep tones of the tabor if the fairy people were really to be pleased. He said the pipe gave the bird notes, especially starlings, who are so friendly with the sheep, and the tabor gave the sheep bars, without which shepherds like Kit, no dandy shepherd he, and Jonas never feel even the larks can sing quite at their best. But one thing was still needed, the secret that Jonas would not tell. One day I saw Kit at his work, though he did not know it. I was up a ladder at the other end of the barn making friends with a family of ugly young owls. We still have a threshing floor in the barn and store our wheat, hence many an owl nests in the barn and lives upon the rats and mice. The big doors were shut, so that Kit's gable end was the lightest place in the barn. He was so busy with his pipe and tabor that he did not hear me. One hand held the little pipe as he blew into it and fingered the holes he had cut in the reed, the other gave the needful tone and insistence by beating upon the little drum, or tabor, and the whole time, the child's head was quickly jerked from side to side keeping the time of his tune. Beside him lay his little crook that once had saved a real lamb from drowning. He had tied a bunch of gay ribbons about its bright iron head. They had been bought for him by Trystie some weeks before with 3 long-cherished pennies of his own, though he would not tell what he wanted them for. Sometimes he shut his eyes for a long 2 minutes, only to open them suddenly upon one or other of his grotesque images, as if thinking to catch them unawares just coming to life. As I quietly stood on my ladder at the other end of the barn, so as not to disturb the child, the impossible thing he desired so ardently came to pass, perhaps only apparently, perhaps actually, I was too far off to be quite sure. The biggest of the absurd creatures, the one with the bulging yellow body adorned with painted black rings, the brass breastplate and the carrot buttons, suddenly, and at the very moment Kit opened his eyes upon it, began to totter, as if, poor thing, it was going to faint. Then it rolled over on to its breastplate. Kit quietly and with infinite self-possession picked up his crook to be in readiness to help it if necessary, and then began again to pipe so loud and merry that I could make nothing of the tune. Now, if I didn't feel quite sure that every child who has father or mother with a streak of fairy soul in them will believe me, I would not tell what followed. Nor would Kit. We know better than most people what must not and cannot be told. You can't wish a scarecrow many happy returns, not if you shout it in his ear, not even if you send it a telegram. It can nohow be done. And why? Because a scarecrow can't understand. Exactly for the same reason you can't tell the realest of things to people who don't believe in fairies, not though you get a bishop or a king to tell them, and why? Just because they can't understand. So neither Kit nor I would waste our breath to warm a plate of cold porridge. But no one who has got as far as this in the story of Kit can be either a scarecrow or a plate of cold porridge, and, as nearly all children have fairy blood in them, though their fathers often deny it, I'm going to tell what next I saw. Kit and Trystie will be responsible for most of the story which comes afterwards. Well, the loud and merry piping, perhaps because it was so horribly out of tune and screechy, seemed to bring the fallen imp round. It rolled over on to its back. Kit's head wagged at it, still in time with the pipes. It wagged and wagged, though his eyes were fast fixed on the silly imp. Then actually the thing began to waddle from side to side and got out of the charmed half-circle. The little brass breastplate tinkled as the imp moved, and the carrot buttons fell off one by one, till it looked quite disreputable. It came nearer and nearer the edge of the floor, and was on the point of falling to the ground below, when Kit jumped up and tried to catch it with his crook. But the creature's head, which was only a mangold, came off the spring backbone, and the rest of the creature fell 5 feet with a thud and jingle. At that very moment the sun must have been covered by a cloud, for the jewelry light vanished and the whole place was dark. No sound or movement came from Kit, but I heard, and Kit heard, a sound of wings among the rafters, and as I opened the great door, having quickly left my ladder when the imp fell, an old brown owl flew out into the daylight. Then Kit came slowly down his ladder with a steady step and joined me without a word. He put his hand in mine. His little face was quite white, and his blue eyes were big and far away. He told me nothing then of his wonderful, if rather horrible, success with the pipe and tabor. He would not eat anything at tea, though there were gooseberry jam and clotted cream. He went to bed and was fast asleep before his mother came to tuck him up and sing with him his little prayer. End of this chapter.